The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the bustling city streets, its golden hue illuminating the glassy skyscrapers towering over the throngs of people. Among them, a black woman walked with purpose, her stride confident, her expression serene yet observant. The city pulsed around her, cars honking, pedestrians chattering, street vendors calling out their wares. It was a day like any other, until it wasn't. A sudden presence in her path halted her steps. A uniformed police officer blocked her way, his stance rigid, his eyes narrowing as they swept over her. There was something in his gaze, a mixture of suspicion and authority, a presumption of guilt before cause. He stood firm, his hand resting heavily on his belt, fingers twitching near his baton. "I need to see some ID," he said, his voice sharp, commanding. The woman's expression remained impassive, though a flicker of irritation passed through her dark eyes. She had been here before, in this unspoken battle, where her very existence was questioned. "What's the reason for this stop?" she asked, her tone calm but firm. The officer scoffed, shifting slightly, angling his body to make it clear that he would not be ignored. "I don't have to explain myself to you. You fit the description." A bitter smile tugged at the corner of her lips. There it was, the phrase she had heard too many times before, the phrase that allowed suspicion to be enough, that turned a baseless hunch into justification. "I fit the description?" she echoed, voice quieter now, controlled. "And what description is that exactly?" The officer's jaw tensed. He wasn't used to being questioned. He took a half-step closer, his fingers curling around the baton at his waist. The weight of his authority pressed against the charged air between them. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult," he warned, impatience creeping into his tone. She remained still, her posture composed, unwavering. Around them, the city continued its relentless pace, but the space between them felt frozen. A few pedestrians had stopped, sensing the tension, unsure whether to intervene or keep walking. Some hesitated. Others raised their phones, capturing the moment in silence. The woman took a slow breath. "I'm not making this difficult. I'm asking you a question." His patience snapped. His hand moved to his cuffs. "Turn around." She didn't move right away. Instead, she studied him, as if measuring the weight of his intent. Then, with a quiet sigh, one that held no fear, only exhausted exasperation, she spoke words that sent an icy tremor down his spine. "You really don't know who I am, do you?" The officer's fingers twitched around his cuffs, hesitation flickering in his eyes. There was something unsettling about the certainty in her voice, something that made the bravado in his chest waver. Before he could tighten the cuffs around her wrists, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Step away from her. Now." The officer turned sharply, his hand instinctively hovering near his belt. A group of men and women in dark suits moved toward them, their movements precise, calculated. Their faces were unreadable, but their intent was clear. Then he saw it, the gleam of a badge pinned to the lapel of one of the approaching figures. Secret Service. His stomach dropped, his grip on his baton loosened. His mind raced to grasp the weight of his mistake. The woman, so composed, so unshaken, adjusted the sleeve of her blazer as if shaking off nothing more than an inconvenience. One of the agents, taller than the rest, stepped forward. His expression remained impassive, but his voice carried a quiet authority that left no room for argument. "You just laid hands on a protected individual." The officer's mouth went dry. His pulse pounded in his ears. He swallowed hard. I didn't know," he stammered, his hand still hovering near his belt, as if uncertain whether to reach for his radio or keep his hands visible. The murmurs among the gathered crowd grew louder. Phones remained lifted, recording every second. Finally, the woman spoke again, her voice smooth, but laced with unmistakable disappointment. "And yet," she said, "you didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect." The silence that followed was deafening. The officer's jaw tightened, but no words came. He knew the damage was done. There was no undoing it, no justifying it. One of the agents exchanged a glance with the others before turning back to him. "You'll be hearing from Internal Affairs." The weight of those words settled on his shoulders like lead. The agents guided the woman away, her composure intact, her dignity untouched. The crowd slowly dispersed, but the moment lingered in the charged air. The officer remained frozen in place, his heart hammering in his chest. He had started this encounter with power, but now all he felt was its crumbling remains slipping through his fingers. And in that moment, he finally understood what so many before him had tried to deny. Power unchecked will always face consequences.